March 4th, 1801 is remembered today as the first peaceful transfer of power in the United States from one political party to another. It's when Thomas Jefferson took the oath of office, replacing John Adams, who was in the presidential election of 1800. And Jefferson's inaugural address was quite short, and I want to focus on just part of one paragraph today that I think shows how truly radical his vision of free speech was, and even today in the 21st century still is. During the contest of opinion through which we have passed, the animation of discussions and of exertions has sometimes worn an aspect which might impose on strangers unused to think freely and to speak and to write what they think. But this being now decided by the voice of the nation, announced according to the rules of the Constitution, all will, of course, arrange themselves under the will of the law and unite in common efforts for the common good. All, too, will bear in mind this sacred principle that though the will of the majority is in all cases to prevail, that will to be rightful must be reasonable, that the minority possess their equal rights, which equal law must protect, and to violate would be oppression. Let us then, fellow citizens, unite with one heart and one mind. Let us restore to social intercourse that harmony and affection without which liberty and even life itself are but dreary things. And let us reflect that, having banished from our land that religious intolerance under which mankind so long bled and suffered, we have yet gained little if we countenance a political intolerance as despotic, as wicked, and capable of as bitter and bloody persecutions. During the throes and convulsions of the ancient world, during the agonizing spasms of infuriated man, seeking through blood and slaughter his long-lost liberty, it was not wonderful that the agitation of the billows should reach even this distant and peaceful shore, that this should be felt and feared by some and less by others, and should divide opinions as to measures of safety. But every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. We have called by different names brethren of the same principle. We are all Republicans. We are all Federalists. If there be any among us who would wish to dissolve this union or to change its Republican form, let them stand undisturbed as monuments of the safety with which error of opinion may be tolerated where reason is left free to combat it. Today, the part of Jefferson's speech that I tend to hear quoted most is the pithy little line, we are all Republicans, we are all Federalists. There's a variation in that on what Barack Obama said at the 2004 Democratic Convention, saying that there's no red America, there's no blue America, we are the United States of America. Sounds great, sounds very nice. But what I find most radical in Jefferson is the sentence immediately after that, which I want to repeat again. He said, if there be any among us who would wish to dissolve this union or to change its Republican form, let them stand undisturbed as monuments of the safety with which error of opinion may be tolerated where reason is left free to combat it. Do we even believe that today? When the Founding Fathers first embedded free speech into the Constitution, the United States was on much more tenuous, insecure footing than it is in the 21st century. There were much greater powers than the United States. They had just fought this long and bloody war with Great Britain, which was still very powerful. France was a major force on the continent. Spain was a major force. Things were precarious. It wasn't really clear how things were going to go. The colonies had come together as separate states to form the Constitution, to form the new general government. And it wasn't really clear that they would stay together necessarily. So it was a much riskier time. It was a time when it was, if anything, it would be more understandable than today to say, well, we've got, some speech is just too dangerous. We've got to restrict it. And in fact, Jefferson's predecessor, John Adams, you could say his once and future friend, had signed into law the Sedition Acts, which made it a crime to criticize the government. There was a real possibility of war with France, and of course, just 11 years after Jefferson would take office, we would be at war with Great Britain. There were reasons to be worried about dangerous ideas spreading. And Jefferson had such incredible confidence that errors of opinion can be safely tolerated, where reason is left free to combat it. I mean, that's just that was a radical idea then, and it still seems like a radical idea today when you think about misinformation boards that the government tries to form, when you think of the government leaning on social media companies, trying to restrict what speech they allow. When you look at the government thinking, well, we need to ban certain apps and let others stand undisturbed, I guess you'd say. There's much less of a culture of free speech than what Jefferson envisioned. And this would get violated again, during the 19th century, for sure. I mean, Southerners, would ban any type of literature that they felt likely to incite slaves to revolt. Lincoln would shut down opposition newspapers during the Civil War, hundreds of them. So, I mean, our commitment to free speech has at various times taken a beating, whether it's from different sections, different political parties. And I just think it's good to get a refresher from Jefferson about just how important free speech is and how confident he was that it was actually better to live with free speech than without it. That, again, if anyone would wish to dissolve this union or to change its Republican form, so this isn't just having the wrong opinions about transgender ideology or the outcome of a particular election or the war between Israel and Palestine, the things that don't affect our immediate safety as a nation anywhere near as much as the real threats that existed to this new United States. The victory over Britain was less than 20 years old at the time Jefferson took office. And yet he says, if there be any among us who would wish to dissolve this union or to change its Republican form, let them stand undisturbed as monuments of the safety with which error of opinion may be tolerated, where reason is left free to combat it. Pretty radical stuff. And I think that's why Jefferson remains an incredibly important and radical figure today. The most interesting thing about him is not that he owned slaves, or that that Sally Hemings may have been his mistress. I think this is one of the most interesting things about him, and something well worth cherishing and celebrating and keeping in mind. I'd love to know what you think about where the culture of free speech stands today, whether it lives up to Jefferson's ideal, whether you think Jefferson's ideal is a worthy ideal. So drop a comment below, and I promise if your opinion is wrong, I will let it stand undisturbed. I also hope you'll share this video with anyone who might be interested, smash that like button on the way out, and of course subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.